I'm aware of that, I'm just running out of options here. Ah, there you are, my ward. Take a seat a moment, I have to finish this phone call real quick. What about the Nosferatu from Munich? Well, then you keep him safe. He's proven his worth 3 times over at this point. Good. Dispatch a task force right away, then. I'm done with this now. I have more pleasant company to deal with. My ward, it is good to see you. I've been awfully busy of recent, and I've missed our little talks. Well, that, and I still think you have much to learn. And while our previous discussions have been on more larger concepts and groups, I have been informed that there are some of the more basic concepts we have yet to go over in greater detail. You see, we have discussed it before, but we haven't really gone over feeding. That is how most kindred feed, and in what way feeding can empower you. You see, there's this very common mortal saying, "You are what you eat." This is not only more relevant for us kindred, but so is how you eat. Doing so correctly can build your strength, empower you, even give you access to new disciplines entirely. But feeding incorrectly can make you sluggish and weak. If you wonder why you're not growing stronger as fast as you would like, perhaps this is the reason behind it. By now you have found a proper way to feed on your own, no doubt, and I'm quite curious to hear what it is, for it's quite likely that another has perfected the way you do it before. You see, there are only so many ways kindred can take blood from another, just as there are only so many ideas one could possibly have. If you have had a thought before, chances are someone else has had them too. Those who get on top are just the ones who know how to capitalize on it first. Regardless, the ways of feeding for us kindred are known as the predator types, common forms of feeding, the strategies we employ in order to get our vitae. See, now that the Masquerade has been in effect for longer than most living kindred, we can't exactly call for a blood tax anymore, not like in the olden days, no. Like with all things, we need to be a lot more subtle in the modern night. Or at least smart enough so that word doesn't go around that there are blood-sucking monsters out of the night. So I might as well list some of the more common ones, but I will let you know most terms and names given are far more akin to kindred slang than any formal speech. You won't really find many in upper Camarilla society speak of such things. It's typically a private affair, you see. But if they do, they will most likely not use these names, but just describe how they feed in detail. Without further ado, I'll start with the most violent and greatest risk of the Masquerade, the alleycat. Ones who use stealth and strength to grab and overpower someone in some dark alleyway. Fortunately, the sensation of feeding for a mortal can be so overwhelming when one is hit completely by surprise, they may not be able to process what just happened. Their mind will break, and they'll just forget such an event. Remember, feeding is an overwhelming sensation for both the kindred and the mortal, so strong in fact that they may struggle to process it. Of course, if they have a discipline like Dominate, they will be able to erase their memories, and that is better, but, well, this is true for all of the predator types. And the most brutish of kindred are often the ones who live the life of an alleycat. Luckily, they are at least smart enough to lick the wounds afterwards, for you no doubt know by now that our blood has healing properties and has replaced our saliva. If, however, they are not fast or overwhelming enough and don't have the means to mess with the mind afterwards, then they may need to kill the one they feed on. And indeed, many an alleycat is a murderer who will discard of a kin's life if they fail to overpower them correctly. Those who feed in such a way often grow stronger in either potence or celerity, and tend to live a more, shall I say, underworld-like lifestyle, often having criminal networks, and are not unused to intimidation and robbery in life. Moving on to those who could only really be of the highest of our generations, the bagger. These are often young kindred that drink from modern bagged blood. It's not too hard to get it, as we Ventru own almost every hospital and sell it to kindred for cheap. Ironic though, as we Ventru can never really feed in such a way. This is a manner of feeding that many take for childish moral reasons, and also greatly weakens you. Or rather, feeds you enough to get by, but not enough to give you enough strength to actually become more powerful. This is arguably your worst way of feeding if you wish to gain strength via doing so, as most of the more potent things you can get through feeding cannot survive the cooling process, but more on those later. Those who feed in such a way often have good connections in getting the blood, or the skills in stealing them, I suppose. They're also often good at keeping down blood that most would vomit at the thought of, and I'm not just saying that because I'm a Ventru, for I have seen a young kindred drink cold, diseased goat blood like it was perfectly fine. This, however, can help them in getting better at obfuscate, and even blood sorcery, believe it or not, but only if they already knew it. Unlike the rest, it wouldn't help you in learning it on your own. For now, let us move on to a term that's not really a way of feeding, but more so who you feed upon. The derogatory term, blood leech, is for one kindred who feeds upon another, and is a fantastic way to become stronger, and something you will eventually need to do if you are to become as strong as I. When your blood becomes so potent, mortal blood only really does anything for you if you drain every last drop. How you actually do so matters little. If you drink from a kindred, this applies to you. And as I implied, I am at the level now where I must feed upon kindred to feel anything. The trick of this is not to drink directly from them, as to not risk forming a bond, and never drink them to their final drop, lest you become a Diablerist. If you do drink from them more directly and do not care for their life, simply get close to doing so, and then kill them in a more conventional way, as to not take their soul by accident. Feeding on kindred, however, makes you much better at fighting them, and even increases your blood potency. That is to say, how naturally powerful your blood is. It'll make it much easier to use your disciplines and to channel your blood. This does, however, take a toll on your humanity and often lessens your feelings towards them, but it can also increase your celerity or protean. Moving on next is the cleaver, another method looked down upon in the Camarilla for its connection to family. You see, these feed on their once close family and friends, and manipulates them in order to maintain the idea that they are still human. After all, it is the forbidden fruit that tastes the most sweet, is it not? This, however, is a masquerade breach just waiting to happen, if you ask me. At least if you are young enough to be within living memory. I do, however, know of a few older kindred who feed on their grand descendants, and given how often humans reproduce, historically speaking anyway, most of us ancient kindred have countless offspring. See, I'm quite old now, over 1,000 years old, closer to 2, in fact, only just, and one of my coterie did the maths. I should be coming up to around 50 million descendants, give or take a few wars, of course, which is probably not accurate, because that's close to the entire population of the United Kingdom. Still, if I fed in this way, I would be spoiled for choice, I imagine. Those who feed in this way often groom their herd to be extra potent, with very beneficial blood. More specifics on that later. They tend to be skilled in dominate and animalism, but are often smart enough, at least, to hide this from kindred society. Now moving on to one that's actively a threat to the Masquerade, those known as consensualists, and these should be reported to your local sheriff at your earliest convenience. As the name suggests, they are kindred that only feed on people that they know what they are and are willing to give their blood. This can only be done if you tell them everything. Many anarchs are known to employ such tactics, as they don't follow the Masquerade as a law, but more so a set of moral principles or some other bollocks like that. Forgetting that trust matters very little when kindred offer hundreds of ways to get information out of people, willing or otherwise. The best way for us to maintain our positions is that no one knows we're there. But of course, that would require people to listen to their elders, and that never happens. Those who employ this bastardry do tend to be more in touch with their humanity, as I'm sure you could tell, and that is an important thing. They also tend to be skilled in auspex and fortitude, but as masquerade breachers, should be blood hunted. Next is another pathetic one. The farmer is one known to only feed on animals and as such has much weaker blood on average and tends to smell horrible to the senses of one of us. They also lack the capability of having more potent blood unless they abandon this foolish feeding style. Many of them often breed and care for their own animals, hence the name. That makes little sense to me, but I don't pick the slang of the modern youth and have already expressed my distaste for it multiple times, so I have no need to waste my unneeded breath. Although I should note that kindred who go out and hunt wild animals also get this label, which makes even less sense to me. Still, these kindred are also good at maintaining their humanity and are skilled in animalism and protean. But again, their blood is weak and their powers fleeting, for with some very rare examples, you cannot gain any powers through a mutt rather than a man. Moving on to one that's not really efficient but always filled with character. The Osiris. Celebrities, icons, and even cult leaders. Kindred who, for some reason or another, have people loyal to them to the point of adoration. The perfect sort of people you can feed upon. Truly the best way to maintain a herd is to have them worship you, no? Of course, the fun part is balancing any form of spotlight with the fact that they are indeed a blood-sucking vampire. Although I find these kindred do very well until they get just a little bit too old for people to think it's just some sort of rich person therapy, for them to realize that their looks are actually impossible. Although they can still do some similar things from behind the scenes, I find that there is a part of them that longs for the spotlight in a way they can just never be satisfied with again. They are of course good at presence, but those already skilled in it tend to get better with some blood sorcery too. And of course they have the power and curse that is fame, and a sizable and quite often potent herd of mortals to feed upon as well. Next is one that's quite common, known as the Sandman. These are kindred who feed upon the sleeping. They often break into homes and use stealth to do so, often commonly used technique of the Nosferatu. These are often employed by those who dislike or struggle dealing with people. In fact, if some younger kindred lose a lot of their humanity fast, they may adopt this feeding style. It's also a smart way to feed on a particular person while keeping the masquerade intact, and a good idea to keep it up. However, many will also use this opportunity to just take a small bit of jewellery or money left on the side. Not enough to be noticed, but enough to have a little bit extra money in your pockets. Those who use this tend to be more skilled in obfuscate and auspex. They, as I said, have a bit more money to their name as well. Well, not to their name, but in their hands. And of course, they're quite good at breaking and entering, as well as skulking around in places without waking anyone up. Let's move on to one that's just too modern for me to understand, and I loathe the name of it. The Scene Queen. These are kindred that feed upon collected groups or subcultures as they call them. An outlandish modern term that I find ridiculous. The point of a culture is to unify. Subdividing one is just asking for some sort of conflict or unrest. These are a group that only feed on those like them. Perhaps they have a favourite form of music or one of those video games that have hit the market like mad. Groups that have like minds and interests. And these kindred feed on the ones that share these unnatural fascinations. They tend to be skilled with dominate or potence. They are also often famous, although purely in that crowd, and have some contacts and connections, but again very limited ones. They will also find blood not of the people in their scene as repulsive. Remember, we are beings of magic. Our wants truly do change what they taste like. And the last one I wish to speak of, the siren. These are simply one that feed during the act of sex with their lover, typically near, shall I say, the height of passion, in hopes that the sensation of feeding is just associated with that more mundane one. Seduction is often tied to the nature of kindred, and so it should be no surprise that this is quite a common form of feeding. I should also note that not all of them actually go through with the act. They do pull them close, seducing and luring them away, but then just bite them and discard them. The act of feeding alone might mess with their mind enough to preserve the masquerade and make them wonder if they actually did or didn't. But of course, some of them do use dominate to keep up appearances. However, these kindred who do feed like this tend to be quite seductive, obviously, but also learn presence and fortitude. They tend to look more on the pretty side too, as I'm sure you imagine, but also come with a bit of relationship baggage. After all, you spend that type of time with so many people, eventually someone is bound to be upset at one point. There are plenty more, but you get the gist of the idea, so I'll move on from how to feed on what you should feed on. The flavours of the blood that we kindred know as blood resonances. You see, there are 4 humours, as we used to call them, and they come in 4 and 2 separate half flavours. You'll understand what I mean in a moment. How we kindred view them has changed quite differently over the years. We associated them with elements, we had the 4 humours, as I said, some have correlated them with different hormones, but I think the one that makes the most sense to me is their emotional connection. They are choleric, melancholic, phlegmatic, and sanguine. There's also animal blood and the sensation you get from feeding on, shall I say, empty people. People who lack emotions or souls altogether. I'll briefly go over those latter 2 at the end. I'll start with choleric, connected with fire, the humour of yellow bile, and the sensation of adrenaline. When one is angry and violent, they will feel this, but also if they are exceptionally passionate or envious of something. In fact, if there is an abuser and their victim, it's quite possible both of them will have choleric blood in that moment, depending on their reaction. Feeding on those of this blood often helps you in learning celerity and potence, even if your clan wouldn't normally know them. You drink this blood and you will feel a kick to your system, like a shot of adrenaline, but taken to an extreme, of course. Those who indulge in caloric too often may find themselves more prone to frenzy, and on rare occasions can frenzy instantly due to a strong sense of it. Then there's melancholic, linked with earth, the humour of black bile, and linked to the thyroid, believe it or not. Those who feel a strong sense of sadness or fear often take a melancholic flavour. Many kindred delight in terrifying their meal, almost always for the taste, not out of some form of sadistic glee. Well, many kindred do it out of sadistic glee, but not most of them. Those who drink this often improve their fortitude and obfuscate. However, it's not the most common for kindred to sense the exact form of fear they induce by drinking this vitae. In fact, some often get a sick sense of pride from the flavour, which many a young neonate has tried to hide, of course. Wow, that also depends, as some do get the exact sense of fear and desperation from drinking the blood. Remember, we are beings of magic at the end of the night. Not everything can fit so nicely into a box. Next is phlegmatic, with water, the humour of phlegm, of course, and linked to the pituitary gland. This is for those who just do a bit less. It's laziness, apathy, calmness, but also strangely something you would feel when you are in control of a situation, or you get a sudden sense of sentimentality. This will help you learn Auspex and Dominate. Those who feed on this blood are often your controlling lordly types, or your more humane, puppy-loving neonates who want to keep everyone safe and happy. Those who look back to the past with fondness also feel such a sensation. This is also my favourite, in case you care. Next is sanguine, connected to air, the humour of blood, and the hormones linked to sex, either testosterone or estrogen, linked to whatever one feels in overabundance. Those who feel this are going through a state of indulgence. They are happy, or horny, or giving into an addiction. They are active or enthusiastic about something. At that moment you say fuck it, and do something you know you probably shouldn't. That's sanguine. It helps you learn presence and blood sorcery. Indeed, despite a blood mage's more dreary natures, they often feed on this blood and really give in their moments. Many kindred feeling a more so, shall I say, human act feel this more strongly. It's also probably the most popular resonance among kindred, simply for the sensation it gives you. If you've ever bit into a human and wondered why they just tasted that much better that night, it's often because of sanguine. Let me quickly go over the 2 halves that don't really count. The first is animal blood. That is, well, the blood of animals, I'm sure you can guess, that has no greater connections or symbolism, and is often connected with animalism, as I'm sure you can guess, and protean. often beloved by foolish kindred who still want to be human, and the more wild ones that live in the woods, for they are still around. Then there's the empty ones, those who lack souls via magical means, or any of their emotions via natural ones. Perhaps extreme psychopaths or sociopaths, the recently deceased, or those who have had their souls ripped out. A state that should not really have its own type, oh but it does, for it is linked to shadow magic, or oblivion and necromancy. Now that you know them, let us speak of when they really start to kick. So far I've only described your basic meals and their flavours, but now let's get into the more refined palate one. You see, only about half a crowd of 100-odd people will actually have some form of resonance, and most of them will not have it permanently, just as a fleeting moment thing. But if someone has a strong resonance for a very long amount of time, I'm talking at least an entire year where it's strong, they may develop what we call a Discrasia. These are the ones you truly wish to look out for. And if you know what you're doing, perhaps you could even try and make one, for they not only taste better than anything else if you already like that flavour, but they will unlock more potential in you, grow your power, and make you far stronger. They are, however, quite potent, to the point where they either don't last too long, say until you really need to feed again, or they will drain the Discrasia from the person, taking it away from them, so to speak. Although they will often still have the resonance afterwards, it is close to unheard of for them to develop the Discrasia again. This is, of course, if they survive the feeding, because many a kindred of strong will has given in and fully drained a mortal with a Discrasia. They are just that delicious. But let me get into what some of them actually do, for they can be quite a mixed bag. For example, caloric Discrasias can make your blows more impactful if you're filled with hate or right now envious of something. It can make you more physically intimidating, or just unlock a part of your blood, letting you progress in learning celerity or potence permanently, regardless of your clan. A melancholic Discrasia is often those that help you resist things. They're ones that let you maintain your humanity or keep yourself grounded in a moment. It's often quite hard to find these in the wild because they are often the type that want to be left alone, so many kindred opt to make one, sometimes using their own families as test subjects, which I'm sure by now you know to be foolish. They can, however, of course, help you learn fortitude and obfuscate. Phlegmatic ones can help calm your mind, making you far less likely to frenzy or help you resist pain, both physical and even emotional wounds. There is one that can help you work better alone too, and one that makes your willpower stronger. And of course, it can help you learn Auspex and dominate remarkably quickly. And sanguine ones often help with some form of communication, with tempting and convincing others. Some can help you appear more human, some with Auspex can use it to see through the eyes of those they feed on, and of course, it helps you with Auspex and blood sorcery, but more interestingly, this can unlock sorcery within you even if you don't normally have access to it. Although unlocking it by this manner alone is difficult, it's often better used to aid one already learning it. There is countless more. In fact, almost anything you can think of linked to them is probably possible to some degree if you know where to look or how to shape mortals' emotions for years. And of course, this is something they can lose over time and must be maintained. I should also note that kindred themselves often have a resonance, although whether it's from who they feed upon or their own emotions often quite depends. But like with many aspects of our nature, both are probably true to some degree. Right, now I have a task for you. Tell me, how have you hunted before? And how do you plan to hunt in the future, knowing all I have just told you? I'll see if I can come up with some ways to improve your power gain from feeding. Thank you for listening to my tales. I'm the Ashspawn. Feel free to leave a like, comment, or subscribe. It would really mean a lot to me. But, till next to me, fellow traveller, have a good night.